that offers non-informal learning for adults suggested that since there is no Portuguese teaching, can we establish a self-learning group? That I would be happy to host it because I had this experience in, teaching and hosting, and they were very enthusiastic about it. That this is something they've tried to do, to have the adult learners to collaborate outside the classes and so on. And we carried on for 2 years. We were 8 Portuguese learners, and we met first in the classroom, and then when the pandemic hit, we would meet in Zoom. Some of them didn't show up because they didn't have the technical skills, but we were like 8 who persisted for 2 years. And then we started feeling like, because I had these pedagogy ideas that we set our own objectives and we find our own ways to learn and so on, and we go where we want to go. But after 2 years, we started to feel that we might need a Portuguese teacher to coach us with a pronunciation, for example, because none of us was more experienced or didn't know anything more than others. None of us could say, you correct your pronunciation. This is how you should say this. And our pronunciation was terrible. And so then we all sought different courses. There I noticed that not everybody was as mature to take on this kind of responsibility for their own learning. But sort of me being the kind of host put me in a position like a teacher, even though I couldn't be a teacher in Portuguese. So it wasn't that easy, but it was a nice group.
But isn't that a part of taking responsibility for your own learning, knowing the point at which you actually need some expert input?
Yeah.
And I think I would argue the case that doesn't mean it comes to an end. It actually just means that you recognize something, that there's not enough for you to be able to keep it going without that extra support. So I think that's an important dimension to it. It's a real life problem for me at the moment, because my colleague is leaving, and therefore although we shared a course, I've now got to look after these students myself. The thing I've always wanted the students to do, which is to take greater responsibility for their own learning, I actually need them to do that more now. So exactly what you were saying, Sisko, about a group of them managing themselves, directing themselves, all those words whizzing around in my head, but and they meeting up to support one another outside of the time that I have with them, and I'm happy for them to do that. I'm really pleased they're doing it. I don't want to interfere with that, and they, as long as they know that they can ask for my input if they need my input, I can see that as a model that is going to work really quite effectively. So all of this is actually very real in terms of, for me, in terms of what I need to do in order to see a way forward. Now I'm thinking, well, this is what I wanted anyway. This is what the direction I wanted to go in. So although it's something I've got very sort of excited about and worked up about, it's actually a very real problem for me at the moment. And it's a potential solution to it, to be able to see how this can happen and then articulate it in a way that can be duplicated, built on, made better in future years. So I'm finding it it's very helpful to me. So thank you. Yeah, thank you both for this.
Sisko, your example of learning Portuguese inspired me to ask you how would you define my strategy and maturity or self-directedness in learning Spanish and now learning Italy? When I started, I didn't like to take a course in Spanish. I learned myself in the beginning, and then on the way I found myself 14 different Spanish teachers online, so recorded Spanish lessons, explaining in the beginning vocabulary, but grammar mainly. And I decided when and what kind of course will I take in a classroom. Then as early as possible, I tried to find myself a person to discuss in Spanish. I tried to find a native Spanish speaker, but finally I found out that my course mate would be the best possible. Now I also have a classmate to discuss in Italy. That's my story of learning two different languages.
I do the same with Portuguese. I've been watching the YouTube channels where they teach different teachers, and I've found the Brazilians in a group on Facebook, Brazilians in Helsinki, whom I discuss in the evenings. So very similar parts.
Yeah.
This is fascinating. Could we actually tie this in as part of our previous discussion about online courses and all that we were talking about before? I think this is highly relevant, and I think it's around the motivation. It's that motivation to learn and developing that motivation to learn so that students can take greater responsibility for their own learning and maybe go beyond the course, the parameters of the course, if they feel they're able to and if they want to, so that we're not actually restricting the learners by saying, well, this is the material that we're going to do, and we can deliver it in an online environment. What about the space that we should leave them for those who want to go further and they want to take more responsibility for their own learning to the point that they take it way beyond where the sort of framework of the course?
I think Jori and I have a kind of self-determined or heutagogy approach to learning languages, but it's a really big challenge to the teacher if you have such students who know what they want and how they want it, and the teacher has a set mind how to teach and like languages.
Two comments. One is about my experience or my way. I've never learned Spanish in Finnish. I've never learned Italy in Finnish. Of course, the book, the 400 pages Spanish book was in Finnish, but I just read it through to understand the whole package of the form of Spanish language, the structure in general, before I started learning details. But that was only thing in Finnish. Then I started learning Spanish in English. Online you can find huge amount of teachers teaching Spanish in English.
But it would be better to teach Spanish in Spanish.
But as soon as possible, I skipped English and I started learning Spanish in Spanish very, very early.
Yeah, I have this conception that in many countries this is how they teach. Like in England, if you have immigrants and you teach them English, you teach it in English and in some third language.
Is it so that when we define online learning, it's always online courses?
So far,
how the teachers manage online course learning.
Yeah.
But in my case, I utilized online courses, but I picked them up. They were ready-made lessons online, but huge amount of short online lessons, maybe 15, 20 minutes each, huge amount. And I picked those that fit to my level. So I was learning online, having online teacher, not in person, not alive, but it was online learning, but it wasn't an online course.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a good place to
online
start
learning and online course might be quite different.
The other question I've got is to go back to self-regulate and think about how is that integrated into online teaching and learning. But the point that you just made, Jori, is I think it's a really good starting point. We make the assumption that online teaching and learning is about delivering a course.
Yeah.
But, is that restricting the whole thing?